What's up everyone, NanMan here with another modern meta breakdown video. And today we've got a really fun deck to talk about because it is the Enchantress deck, a deck that never really existed in Modern until Modern Horizons 2. Now there were some pieces and people tried to make stuff work, but it wasn't really flushed out to where it is now. So let's jump into it and talk a little bit about what happened and why it was able to come about. All right, so if you guys watch our kind of videos that we had leading up to Modern Horizons 2, we did 3 decks to look out for when Modern Horizons was coming out. And one of the decks that we highlighted was the Enchantress deck. Now, there's some sweet cards that came out from Modern Horizons 2. You can see a lot of them kind of scrolling up above. There's also some older cards that I'm also scrolling in this kind of slideshow for you guys to see because just, you know, how important there are. There's only 11 creatures in this list, and so we'll kind of dive into the ins and outs of this list, why you might be playing this style of Enchantress over a different style, and just kind of talk about the different pieces that make up this list. Talk about 11 different creatures. They all just sort of stack on top of each other to make the deck better, right? Compared to other decks where it's like, oh, low creature count, super important to have one of these creatures. Same is true with this sort of list because all of these creatures matter with the rest of your list. Like where other low creature counts are like more combo-y, like when we're talking about something like Boggles, which is a previous version of an enchantment deck that existed, where you'd get one of those creatures and just basically go Voltron style and build it up with a bunch of auras on it and just swing in for somebody. This is kind of caring more about just having this building up of a fort around you. Not so much Pillow 40 strategy like in Commander, but something similar. So let's talk at least about our newest creatures that are running around here, right? Which, if people are familiar, of course, we've got our Enchantress herself. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. That's really powerful for this list when we look and we see there are 29 enchantments. And that's, of course, matters when it's actually more than that because our creatures are also enchantments. So, hey, we're guaranteed going to be gaining a life and drawing a card pretty much every single turn. So that's kind of our pillar, right? There's commander decks built around her. She's awesome. To kind of supplement her, we need more mana, right? To be able to ramp out into other things. This Sanctum Weaver is also crucial because of the specific strategy that we're running with this version, which is that Blood Moon version. So being able to have access to all of our colors is really great because it's mainly, like you can see looking at the list, it's basically a Selesnya green-white list. There's the red in there for Blood Moon, so we don't really care about our lands because we have things like Sanctum Weaver in here that lets us add any mana that we want in basically combination equal to the number of enchantments we control. And again, we have a lot of enchantments, right? 40 enchantments in the whole deck. So, Destiny Spinner is in here to help protect us. Creatures and enchantment spells that you control can't be countered, so sorry all you blue players out there, you're not shutting us down this way. We can at least get out there. It's a 2/3 for 2, so already you're just like, okay, here's a super solid enchantment with a body. If you're playing like something super fast and aggro like Blitz or something like that, like you at least have something that can do some blocking early on if need be, but the way to win with this deck revolves around Destiny Spinner, right? It's a 2/3. This pay for mana, target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until the end of the turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control. We have 40 enchantments in this deck. It's going to be really big and it's going to be really scary. So being able to have a bunch of enchantments, make a bunch of mana off to Sanctum Weaver, and then make a bunch of lands into creatures is our win con. When I was originally talking about the creation of the Enchantress decks as this sort of like Pillow 40, I'm going to be sitting behind my walls, right? Suppression fields and doing things like that. We talked about being able to win off of making a bunch of tokens, right? With Sigil of the Empty Throne here. But that's a sideboard card fair, so we're not going to rely too much on this. So this way is great. Just kind of dump our mana into making creatures. Now, Sanctum Weaver is not the only way for us to accelerate in this list. So we've got a lot of ways to kind of increase our mana, right? Abundance Growth, Utopian Sprawl. They're two exact same cards essentially that allow us to get extra mana, and we, you know, with depending on which one it is, we're going to draw a card, right? So Abundance Growth here, when it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. Sweet. If we also have Sithis out, we're going to draw an additional card. So keep going with that card advantage here. We're going to be drawing more cards in a blue deck here. So if you want that sort of mentality without having to play blue, this is the style for you to be playing. So Abundant Growth is in here. Utopian Sprawls, you're enchanting it on a land, and you are able to get more mana off of that land, right? In this case, Utopian Sprawls specifically has to be enchanted onto a forest. Shouldn't be too hard for us to at least get a forest out, right? We're running a bunch of snow-covered forests, we're running temple gardens. We've got ways to get forests. We're not worried about that. But we get to add an additional mana that we choose. So in this case, we might say we're going to get white mana off of it, right? Keep ramping up that way. So we've got kind of a ramps that way. We've also got this Mana Bloom in here, which I think is a sweet addition because you see it's like an X cost card. It is an enchantment, so again, Sithis will trigger, and we keep going with all those draw things. Generates us with mana. We put counters on it when we are going to be casting it. So if we spend 3 mana to cast it, right, it's going to have 2 counters on it. When we can remove a counter, get a mana of any color. Once we have used all of our counters on it, at the beginning of our upkeep, we can be able to return it to our hand and cast it later on. Get more life, be able to draw more cards, right? We can just keep that train going. So great ways to kind of go along with that. We've got our mana things. Now we can kind of think about, all right, we have ways to generate a bunch of mana. How are we going to interact with our opponents and mess with our opponents? How are we going to continue to protect our stuff, right? Destiny Spinner is great because we can't be countered, but how do we protect our stuff once it's out on the field? So we've got things like On Thin Ice, which goes specifically, ties in directly with our Blood Moon because, right, you have to be enchanting our snow land. We can be able to say, okay, get out of here, exile target creature until this On Thin Ice leaves. But when we're saying go away, enchanting a snow land, it works out great. Right, we've got forest in here, we've got snow-covered plains. Our Blood Moon's going to be shutting down you from being able to do too much, and so when you finally land a creature, then we can be able to just exile it. We've also got our Banishing Light in here as well to be able to exile a non-land permanent. So if you're playing planeswalkers or artifacts, we can be able to deal with it that way, where On Thin Ice is specific for a creature, but it only costs 1 mana. So it's very nice to be able to kind of add those in here. So it's like lock you out of being able to play your stuff with Blood Moon. If you're able to get something out, a creature, well, we've got On Thin Ice ready to go. Banishing Light, dealing with everything else under the sun. Switching over to our protection of the list, right? Of course, we've got our Solitary Confinement. Cost 3. We've talked about this during spoiler season, but at the beginning of your upkeep, sack Solitary Confinement unless you discard a card. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards, right? We saw Utopian Sprawl gets us cards. Sithis is getting us cards. We're going to be drawing cards. We're not that worried about it. You skip your draw step. That's a little sad. I'm not that worried. We're casting enchantments all the time. We'll be okay. You have Shroud, and you prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. That includes non-combat damage. So all those Blitz players or Burn players out there that are going to try to get in there, you can just ignore them and say, well, I'm not taking any damage. Enjoy pumping your creatures for nothing. Enjoy wasting your burn spells for nothing because it doesn't do anything to me. So that's why there's 3 in this list. You don't want to run too many. You could put an extra one in the sideboard depending on how things go, but having discard cards, if you don't have that draw outlet, it does make it a little bit dicey, so be careful about that. But again, there's other ways to draw cards because we have Enchantress Presence. Again, another one of those reprint cards into Modern. It's an enchantment by itself, and whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get to draw a card. So it ties in directly with that Sithis and going to be just kind of generating that card advantage. Again, we talked about being able to draw more cards than blue decks. This is the way to be able to do it, is just stack yourself full of all these draw effects. So our idea, besides being able to draw stuff, be protected from Solitary Confinement, we also have our Greater Auroramancy here. It's an enchantment. Cost 2. It is spiked in price specifically because of this deck, right? Otherwise, it wasn't really seeing any play. Now it's running around $80 for it. So other enchantments you control have Shroud. That means that neither player can target them with a spell or ability. Enchanted creatures you control also have Shroud. Doesn't really matter on that second part because, again, 40 of our cards in our deck are enchantments. Our creatures are enchantments. So they automatically have Shroud because of that first line of text that other enchantments you control have Shroud. So we don't have to worry too much. So it's basically saying, I'm blanketed protection. You can't mess with me. I'm going to just draw cards. I'm going to eventually play this Blood Moon so then you can't play your spells. And then I'm going to beat you down with a bunch of mountains that are now 10/10s because I have so much mana. I can use Sanctum Weaver to dump that mana into our Destiny Spinner, turning my lands into creatures that have trample, have haste, and just start boom, 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 chipping away at you. So it's a little bit different than I originally had planned for when I was talking about the list, but you can look that the sideboard does kind of go into the more control-y stuff. I've got Suppression Field in here, right? Authority of the Councils, just tapping you down, gaining more life. We've also have our Wheel of Sun and Moon, just kind of mess with graveyard strategies. It's a lot of one-ofs in here, but you can see there's even some big stuff. Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, our Sigil of the Empty Throne. So we have different strategies to win if something comes up that messes with our Destiny Spinner, right? If you're running Pithing Needles or things to shut down activated abilities, you mess with this list initially. Outside of that, sideboard though, we have ways to just go wide and make a bunch of 4/4 Flying Angels, or we can say, hey, here's an Annihilator for 12/12. Get ready to deal with this. You can generate a bunch of mana off it. Remember, your lands are essentially tapping for 2 mana every time because of Abundant Growth, because of Utopian Sprawl, and then our Sanctum Weaver is guaranteed going to be generating a bunch of mana. So this list is awesome. It's a really cool way to be able to be playing in Modern. A lot of the pieces, again, are relatively cheap with a few exceptions. Like I talked about how Greater Aurormancy has skyrocketed in price. That's the most expensive piece in this, minus certain fetch lands and things like that. But fetch lands just got reprinted, so you might be able to pick those up if you haven't yet. Let me know what you guys think about the list. Do you like the idea of being able to Blood Moon people and then just say, hey, I don't really care, the mountains don't bother me? Would you rather see it more be token generation and have the sigil in the main board and go for that route? Let me know. Leave a comment down below, and we'll be doing more videos for you guys to be able to enjoy in this month. We've got a sweet game of Commander that's going to be coming up for you guys to be able to check out, as well as more decks that we're going to be highlighting for our Modern Meta breakdown video. But that's going to do it, guys. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next. Hey everyone, NanMan here. I'm a StarCraft 2 and Magic the Gathering content maker and commentator. Thanks for tuning in and watching, guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and check the description for more information about other content that I'm doing. I've also got a new podcast, NanMan's Nerd Corner, which you guys can find out on Spotify or iTunes. It's got a bunch of Magic content as well as other stuff. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and I'll see you guys next game.